Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. It's time for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
It's called STEM. That's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And these are the fields that many believe are the keys to the nation's future in the 21st century. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Number of jobs in these areas is expected to grow dramatically. And a nationwide effort has been launched to get more students involved in these fields with the STEM Education Coalition based in Washington, D.C. Here in Maryland, efforts are underway to hold a STEM festival. It will take place November 6th through the 15th. And our in-studio guest is Rogofsky. He's director of the Maryland STEM Festival, and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Don. I'm glad to be here.
So, well, tell us a little, first of all, about this effort in Maryland before we get to the need for these particular skills. What are you guys doing here? Mm-hmm. How many people are participating? What kind of involvement, for instance, do you have with, say, the universities, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Well, the traditional STEM or Science Festival is a one-day event which occurs in one location. There's been a growing trend. It's a small trend, but it's a growing trend, and we want to be in the forefront of having regional festivals where they set aside a certain length of time, a weekend, a day, a weekend, a week, sometimes even a month, and events are hosted all over the region and fall under the umbrella of that regional event. One of our models is the North Carolina Science Festival, which this past year had 700 events. So we will be, I don't want to say hosting, but we'll be the umbrella over well over 100 events across the state. They will be geared for students. Some are for specific ages, preschoolers or high school kids. Some are for the whole age range. And we're encouraging these to be family events. We would like the whole family, if possible, to attend. Getting on to local, there will definitely be a number of local events. We've spoken to the university. They are planning to host an event or two. University of Maryland Eastern Shore is already committed to having an event. St. Mary's County Public Schools is going to host an event. I think Waconomo Public Schools just submitted a few events on Friday. So we anticipate a number of events across the Eastern Shore as well as across the state.
Now, I understand that in terms of filling the kind of expanding number of jobs that we're looking at, I ran across one quote, I think it was in the Council on Foreign Relations, that something like 60% of U.S. employers are having difficulties finding qualified workers to fill these kinds of vacancies at their companies. Why is it that we have this shortage, do you think?
It's basically because not enough students are going into these fields. There is certain stigma among some of the younger kids. Some kids think it's too hard. Some kids think it's not for them. Some think it's boring or, it's not cool to go into STEM, into science and technology. And I mean, that's really the number one reason. I mean, the schools are pushing it. The government is pushing it. Industry is pushing it. There is a big push on to get them in, but you've got to get them in. And the earlier you start, the better it is. I was just at a fair last week, and I was speaking to the owner of a company, and he said, if you gave me 100 computer engineers today, I could put them all to work. So yes, unfortunately, there is a lot of openings, and some of the projections are saying these openings are going to increase, not decrease. So we are working to fight that or fill that need.
Do you think that there's an awareness? I mean, I ran across, I think it was Microsoft, they did a STEM survey, and they said, the quote was that although most parents of K through 12 students, about 93% believe that STEM education should be a priority. Only about half that is agreed that it actually was a top priority that where this nation is confronting, is dealing with. Do you agree with that?
No, I think it's a much greater need and issue for the country as a whole, and Maryland in particular, because more and more of the jobs are going to be very dependent upon STEM and STEM focused. And even jobs that are not in traditional STEM fields like engineering or medicine or mathematics, so many of the non-STEM jobs will be dependent upon STEM. I mean, music, art, all these things are incorporating more and more STEM. Research in the humanities, STEM is just critical to those fields as well as engineering and astronomy and so forth. So
do you think that there's enough emphasis yet being placed on the educational level?
Well, personally, I don't, which is why we're
Right.
organizing this, and we're trying to help that effort. I mean, the schools are doing a lot, and they're doing a good job, but part of it is a resource issue. They only have so much money to put into STEM and to find the best ways to attract kids for STEM. And as I said earlier, one of the things we try to attract them early, but we also want to attract them even if it's not early, because I feel it's never too late to get involved with STEM. STEM is such a wide world, a wide environment, that there's something in it for everybody. Not every part of STEM is for everyone, but there is a part of STEM for everyone.
I mean, do you think that students look at STEM and say, whether it's science, mathematics, whatever, this is just simply too hard? I mean, that's something I think I ran across. The Office of Science and Technology talked about that something like fewer than 40% of the people who enter college are going to be completing or going into STEM at all.
Yes, some of it is that somewhere along the line they have gotten a perception that STEM is too hard for them. And unfortunately, sometimes that comes from the parents. Parents who have had a bad experience with STEM, who didn't go into STEM, sometimes unconsciously and consciously voiced those views on their kids, and the kids absorb that. They realize, well, if STEM's so important, why didn't my parents do it? And sometimes it's because the parents said, well, I had this really bad math teacher in 5th grade, and I just realized math wasn't for me, and just because of that one teacher, I decided to get out of STEM and go into something else.
Now, of course, we're concentrating on obviously things like universities, that kind of thing. But there's a suggestion that that we don't really even begin to do this at an early age at all. I mean, there's National Science Foundations talked about how something like 54% of 4th graders and 47% of 8th graders, they hardly have ever file any reports, do any reports on science projects. It's just not there. I mean, do you think we're starting too late?
In some cases, yes, although I don't think it's ever truly too late. There was someone on one of my committees who didn't really take an interest in science until high school, and now she's a biology teacher. But it is easier the earlier you get them. The more that they're open to possibilities, the more their curiosity is still willing to go to any avenues, it does make it a bit easier to get to them. And in the festival, we are doing a lot to reach to the younger kids. We're partnering with a lot of the libraries, and a lot of them are having programs for preschoolers. So yes, it does make the process, the task easier if you start younger, but it doesn't have to start that way. You can grab someone at almost any age and turn them into a STEM fan.
There's been a lot of criticism of the public education system, whereby we're not as high as perhaps we should be in mathematics, or we're not high in terms of even reading, for that matter, which is obviously liberal arts, but particularly mathematics and science, that kind of thing, that we are behind. What are we to fault the public education system for not stepping up, or is there some other way around that? I mean,
to me, part of it is it's not a unified workforce. Not everybody's working together to focus on STEM. Some schools do better than others, and again, a lot of it comes back to resources, and a lot of it comes back to the teacher's own experience. I mean, if teachers themselves had bad experience in math and science, they're going to kind of voice that again back onto the kids. The parents have to be behind it, the schools need to be behind it, and the kids got to see that this is something that they will want to do and something that they like. And it's also, we need to show them this is something part of their everyday life, which is something I'm always working on, is to show them the connection between what they do every day and STEM. They don't always see the connection. Even when they're playing video games, they don't think that, you're playing that great video game. You could actually make a living programming video games. They listen to the music. They don't think about all the technology goes into making their iPods and their iPhones and recording the MP3s. They see sports and, they just see the great Ravens or whoever on the field, and they don't think about there's a lot of math going into that. There's a certain amount of engineering and the equipment that's going in there. There's physiology and physics, and STEM is part of everything they do, and the sooner they realize that, the more open they will be to following interests in STEM.
Do you think part of the problem, and I certainly find myself doing this from time to time, is that we assume these sort of magical qualities to these devices that we have, the latest being obviously the smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really think about how it works or how it interacts, and we get mad if the app doesn't download right or whatever, but we don't really understand why any of that. Do you think we're just sort of accept the idea that there's these things around that we don't have to understand?
Yes, and that's part of when I say you don't have to choose a STEM field to need this information. You are using STEM in your life every day. As you say, the phone, they're talking about wireless, driverless cars.
Right.
You're going to need to know more and more STEM, even if you are a lawyer or a poet. You're going to need to know STEM. So I think we do, in many cases, take things for granted. I do get frustrated with my phone. Why aren't I getting a signal here? But then I also sit at the computer and think, I just sent a request to LA and I got it back in 5 seconds. Somehow a signal got across to LA in 5 seconds and brought me some information back. And everybody should sit back and think that's amazing. I mean, think of how long that took 100 years ago to get a piece of information from LA to Maryland. Now you can get it in 5 seconds. It would have taken, 5 months 100 years ago? Even 50 years ago, it would have taken, a couple hours. Now you can get that same piece of information or more information in 5 seconds.
Now, what about the economic opportunities in terms of people going into mathematics or science? I understand that if you go into a number of these fields, that you can get some pretty dramatic increases in terms of the amount of money that you might make per year.
Yeah, I don't have specific numbers, but
Sure.
you look at the Department of Labor statistics and other statistics, the salaries for engineers and mathematicians and healthcare professionals just seem to continue going up and up and up and to be the leading fields producing the best income and the best possibility for financial success in the future. And that doesn't seem to be going backward. It seems to be going forward and seems to be increasing. And not just the levels, but also the breadth, because jobs a long time ago didn't necessarily require STEM. Now you have to have some STEM knowledge. For example, machinist. 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, you could have gone and worked in a factory with very little experience. They could train you in a few days and you could do your job for a very long time. Nowadays, a lot of these factory jobs, you have to come in with a certain amount of technology and math background so they can even teach you to do the work. And that should only expand as technology becomes more and more integrated into our everyday lives and what we do to produce commerce.
Do you think that young people realize that?
Some do, some don't. And in some ways it is hard, especially when you're really young, to see it. Some kids do see it as they get older. But again, the earlier they see that, the better their chances of finding which part of STEM they're going to like and which part they'll succeed in. But it's never too late. You can even do it in college. People make career shifts after college. People decide, hey, I want to be a computer programmer. I want to be a EMT. It's possible even as an adult to switch into a STEM field if you didn't have the background, if you're willing to put the effort into it.
How difficult do you think these kinds of classes or this kind of course of study is difficult, as opposed to, say, the liberal arts?
Again, it varies. Some of them are very, very hard, and it also varies on the person. Some people, if they really like a subject, it doesn't seem hard.
Yeah. So one of the other things strikes me is that there's a suggestion, as I've read some of the literature, that we think about you go to college, you get a 4-year degree, or maybe you get a master's or whatever, that kind of thing. But there's a suggestion, particularly in the field of STEM, that maybe you don't have to do the 4-year degree. That if you create all these skills for yourself, that you'll be able to be successful, at least certainly financially. What about that? Do you think there'll be a pairing off, as it were, sometimes, and we won't necessarily have as many people or going to college as perhaps might have been, because they're now going into what might be STEM itself in very specialized forms?
There's always been non-traditional or a wide variety of ways into commerce and into industry, and it's no different with STEM. I don't think that you have to go to a 4-year school. Yes, some jobs you can pick up the skills in high school. Some of you can pick up them on your own. Some of them you can go to, say, a trade school or a specialized school, like a 1 or 2 year school. There are many, I'm sure you can even be as an apprentice, work under someone for a while and get into the field that way. So a 4-year college degree is not mandatory. It may still be the best route, but it's certainly not the only route.
So how did you get involved with this, by the way? Now that I'm talking to you, how How did you wind up as the head honcho, as it were, of this?
Well, I won't go back too far, but I'll go back to where my involvement with these type of activities began. About 5 years ago, they had the first U.S. Science Engineering Festival on the Mall in D.C. And I took my son. It happened to be October 23rd. It was his birthday, and that's what he wanted to do. He's always been interested in STEM. So we did that, and he said, this is so cool. It's a shame, a lot of my friends aren't going to be here because it's so far away. So I said, let's try and do a similar one at your school. He was going to Wild Lake Middle School in Columbia, Maryland, so we did one there, and it was very successful. And a couple parents who came from other schools said, this is great. We'd like to partner with you. And so I got the idea of trying to do a county-wide event, and I got together some great folks, some like-minded people, and we started organizing STEM and math festivals in Howard County. We've done 3 STEM festivals. We're getting ready for our 3rd math festival. We've attracted 1,500 to 2,000 people to these events, students and parents. They've been very well received. The kids love them. And so from there, I attended a meeting at the 3rd U.S. and Science Engineering Festival about these regional STEM festivals. And the guy almost put it to me, said, well, why doesn't Maryland do it? And so that got me rolling and thinking, it's like, why doesn't Maryland do it? So I reached out to a number of people, and there were people who thought that, this is a great idea, and it's been growing and growing. And November 6th will be opening everywhere.
Right. So, but now, by the way, one of the things that did strike me, as particularly here on the Eastern Shore, is that right down the way in Virginia, we've got the Wallops Flight Facility, which generates a lot of interest. How important do you think it is for a region like this? I mean, especially a region where we're looking at, say, a lot of old manufacturing, which has obviously disappeared from the area, and a lot of folks are saying, well, gee, we need high tech, we need some kind of labor force to attract those kinds of industries, in addition to the growth that we see down at Wallops. How significant do you think this is for the Eastern Shore?
You're talking about the festival event itself?
The festival event itself, and more broadly, as our economy seems to be changing.
It is changing, and we do need to do more to attract businesses and the youth into these activities. Now, one thing that is very big on the Eastern Shore is agriculture.
Right.
It's a huge industry. It's very important to the life of the Eastern Shore. And a lot of kids don't realize that agriculture is more and more becoming dependent on STEM. And that's one thing we're trying to show with this fest. We're trying to get as many companies and groups and organizations involved with agriculture to be a part of it, to show that studying math and science, you still could go into agriculture. They're going to need you. What crops do I plant? What's the best way to treat the animals? How do I plow the crops? How do I forecast the weather? Agriculture has always really been dependent on science, but more and more it's becoming dependent on technology and engineering. And so they don't have to leave the Eastern Shore, and there are ways they can build up agriculture through STEM, and that they can involve in STEM and stay out here if they'd like to, and still be involved with STEM and the great movement that's taking this country forward.
So you have children, I take it. Are you moving them in the STEM direction there, or what do they think of what Dad's doing here?
Well, they don't like too much of what Dad does, but my older son is definitely on an engineering path. He's deciding which engineering field, but he's in a program called Project Lead the Way at his high school, which is an engineering program, and he's looking at different engineering schools. So he's definitely on that track. My daughter is a little younger and not as certain. She does like her math and science class, but she wants to be a civil rights lawyer.
Okay.
Although she also talks about being an environmental lawyer, which works in the STEM. Of course, her ultimate goal is actually to be president. So. Oh,
I see. Don't shoot small.
No, she shoots big. She wants to be governor of Maryland someday and then president. So these are her stepping stones. Some sort of lawyer, civil rights or environmental, helping people, governor, and then president. She'll be the first STEM president.
Okay. And what about you? I mean, were you involved with science at all? What was your background?
I was more involved with math. I have an accounting background. I'm involved with information technology and system security. My mother is a math teacher, so I got that love of math and interest in math. And going through school, it was kind of between engineer and accounting and finance, and accounting and finance kind of won out. But I've always been interested in engineering and science. I mean, I like to watch science programs and read science books. I grew up in the 60s when the space program was taking off, and I was in love with the space program. I used to watch as many takeoffs and landings, splashdowns as I could, and my other favorite thing was Jacques Cousteau and the environment ecology, which was exploding also in the 60s. So I've always had a deep interest in STEM, and I guess for my mother, who was a math teacher, I've always wanted to be some sort of a teacher, and in a way I see myself teaching through these festivals.
By the way, some people observe that the technological changes, they tend to affect how we look at the world, how we interconnect. I can remember growing up in the 1960s and 70s, and we talked about, for instance, television, which was the prime communication device at the time, which radically changed the way we view the world. How do you think, as you sort of think about STEM and the kinds of changes, technological changes that we've seen? Matter of fact, I saw an interview with somebody who suggested that even service jobs may very well wind up being replaced by something that's automatic, not necessarily robots, but something that's automatic. How do you see this technological revolution impacting the way people live?
Well, people are going to need to be very adaptable because things are changing. There's a common quote going around that most people in school, the job that they're eventually going to work in isn't even invented today. So people need to be adaptable, and they also need to accept and incorporate STEM in their life. They don't need to be or shouldn't be afraid of it, which some people still are. And it's something that we're trying to eliminate is any sort of fear of STEM, because it's part of your existence. It's there really to help people. We have a Facebook page, and the other day I put up an item from NPR about apps that are helping people with disabilities do things. So technology has really always been or should always be there to help people, and as long as people think about that, they shouldn't be afraid of it.
Do you think it changes the way we connect with one another?
It does. It can't not do it. Some ways good, some ways bad. I mean, you know, the kids, they spend a lot of time on their phones sometimes instead of face-to-face with people, but they also connect with people that they could never connect with 10 years ago. So it's a double-edged sword. So yes, it does. And I'd like to think it's more positive, but in a way there are a few drawbacks of how we interact due to technology.
So is this, obviously you're having a festival in November. Are we going to see a repeat of this?
Yes, we're looking this as an annual event. We're calling this the first one, but we have already got commitments and interest for future years. We're not going away. We will be doing it this year. We're looking for a big success. We're getting support throughout the state from the government and the business community and the education community. And we see it almost not being possible not to do it again next year. I know a lot of double negatives, but it's going to happen next year. Around the same time frame. We looked at the schedule. Early November seemed like the best time, and if it all goes well, it'll be again next November and for many Novembers to come.
By the way, has there been a much financial investment from the state in terms of organizing this, or what's the state's involvement been? I mean, obviously you're doing it on a statewide level.
I'm doing a statewide level, but so far all of the people involved, except for our web designer, are volunteers. We are seeking sponsorship from any organization that's interested in sponsoring. We've gotten from a number of companies, and many universities and colleges have been giving us financial support. So that is how we're funding ourselves. We're about 2/3 of our fundraising goal. We don't see a problem with us reaching it this year, and we know next year there are a lot more that will jump in. So the state's involved. The Department of Business and Economic Development is helping us get the word out, helping us reach out to companies. We're also working very heavily at Senator Cardin's office. One of the key people who helped me get the ball rolling is Renee Cohen, who's one of Senator Cardin's senior staff persons. But we've gotten support from other congressmen and Mikulski, and from county executives are reaching out to us. And we have Dr. Lowry from the superintendent of the school system is on our advisory board. So we're getting support across the state.
And from the business community, how involved have they been? I mean, contributing?
Yes, they have. We have many of the businesses have already jumped on board. Northrop, W.R. Grace, T. Rowe Price, Geico, Tenable, many more we're talking to and are planning to be involved. So we're getting a lot of support from the business community as well.
And how much do you expect, and financially, how much do you expect to raise to pull all of this off?
This year, our goal is about $150,000. And again, we're about 2/3 of the way there, with a lot of companies saying that, yeah, we're looking to be a partner to join you. Right now, our largest support is actually from the colleges and universities. They're all very supportive of this, and they've been becoming sponsors, and we expect a lot more sponsorship from the colleges and universities. But we're getting it from industry as well as colleges and some other groups.
So now here on the Eastern Shore, so did we have Salisbury University participating?
Yes, they have told us. So I'm working with a woman over there who has said they will definitely host a couple events. Again, Eastern Shore, U of M at Eastern Shore is already committed to hosting an all-day event. St. Mary's County is having an all-day event. So, yeah, we expect to see a lot of events here.
And so are you going to be around for that, or are you going to be across the way?
I am going to try to go to as many counties in that 10-day period as possible. I will definitely make a trip to the Eastern Shore. I obviously won't be able to get to all 200 events, but I'd like to try to get to at least one event in the majority of the counties. So I will definitely be spending a little bit of time dropping in on a couple events here.
So we should see your face here.
Yes.
In November. Okay. We've been talking with Phil Rogofsky. He's the director of the Maryland STEM Festival, and which, of course, is going to be in November 6th through the 15th, and we appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us.
Thank you very much for having us. We look forward to a lot of support and a lot of involvement for folks on the Eastern Shore and a lot of attendance at some wonderful events.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast on iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, view the daily times, or visit pac14.org.